Oscar Wilde said, there are no women geniuses. They are simply a decorative sex. What do you reckon?
Well, obviously I disagree.
Well, you're sitting next to me and I'm living proof,
Yeah,
of course.
obviously I disagree.
We've seen very little evidence of women's impact in history or art or culture or politics, right? If you were an alien and you came down and you looked through our history of, you know, humans on Earth, you couldn't help but think, well, the guys are clearly better at all this stuff because they're everywhere. What are the chicks doing?
There are a number of reasons why this is the case, why women historically and continue to be less represented and less encouraged and
less visible.
And less visible.
Is it true because they're not as smart, they're not as driven, they're not as passionate, or is it true?
You know that I'm just going to say no.
No, right. I know. But or is it true? I'm just unpacking this.
Yeah.
Or is it true because women have what I call the sexually transmitted inconvenience of having children, and therefore and you know, I've got 3 children. You can have them if you like, and. With that comes a certain, not opting out, but there is...
What do you mean opting out?
Well, you're not as available. Women don't have wives, generally. I know a few women who do, because they're in same-sex relationships.
Yeah.
But...
do you mean like a facilitator?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, the mere bump and grind of... Think about how we live now with washing machines and food that can be delivered and drive through fast food places and spray and wipe things and cars that can drop kids off to school. Yeah, and hairspray and all that kind of stuff. How labour intensive life was. And so much of the caring, not just for the children, but for
the home and the...
Yeah, for the home, for the older relatives, for disabled relatives, that fell on the shoulders of the women.
Well, maybe that's the thing, you know, like the notion of an artist or genius or whatever, it sort of implies this kind of singular, you know, obsessive almost pursuit and dedication to something that is not as fundamentally useful or helpful as a well-fed child and a well-kept house. Like,
I meet women all the time, very rarely men, but women who say doing this is selfish, it's indulgent, it's narcissistic, you know.
Fun.
Or it is, but particularly women with children. And let's face it, it must be about 75% of women do have children. They will say it feels like you're taking time away from your children, you're taking time away from your household, you're taking time away from your partner, whatever.
How do you feel about that?
I don't totally disagree.
Well, but you said before that you were doing your stuff, and then in your words, you said, I disappeared and had kids.
I did. I always worked. Right. I always worked. I worked from Dominic was born. He was my first child. 2 days later, I had an article in the newspaper. I remember with Charlie, the little one, taking him to work at 3 days old, 4 days old.
Yeah. Have you heard about Pope Joan?
I have been to the cafe, but tell me.
I don't know much, but I saw it. I saw that cafe and I was like, what? So I went home and I wikied Pope Joan. And she was this... It's a legend, it's a myth, which means that it was real probably, and they just like wrote her out of history. But she was this woman who was in the Catholic church, but she disguised herself as a man and was like extremely charismatic and extremely powerful and extremely good at the core thing that it takes to be a pope or a powerful leader. And then one day she was out riding on horseback and gave birth to a kid accidentally. And
could happen to anyone.
I know.
Could happen during this interview.
I was on the tram the other day and
Number 96. Yeah.
After that, it's sort of unclear, but she was certainly killed. In every version of the story, she's killed. And then sort of over the years, she's just sort of been raised. And I just thought that was sort of interesting because I reckon she might have been a bit of a genius. You know?
There's only ever been such a small amount of space, historically, culturally, artistically, politically, religiously, for women, that if you get to that position, it's like, there's only enough room for me. I'm sorry, all the seats are taken here. When you first put out a piece of music...
Well, you know, like when you release anything, I was super excited because
of course.
It's real and it's out of the world. And I think I'd put out an EP or something. I can't even remember what it was, but I rushed off and I bought the magazine, so I knew it was going to be in the magazine, And I read the piece that they'd written, and I got all fizzy and excited. But at the end of it, it was very like complimentary. But they said, you know, move over such and such. There's a new gun in town.
No, say who it was.
I can't.
You can. I can, because I read it. It said, move over Sarah Blasco. There's a new gun in town. It's like, and what did you think? I know what I thought.
Well, I just thought, why does she have to move?
Why her? Why are you pulling her out?
I love Sarah, and she was a huge inspiration for me. And I found it interesting that whenever people talk about me or her or anybody, Claire or Kate Miller-Heidke or anyone, they always have to say female singer-songwriter.
I know, but they never, that's exactly right. I never see them compare most female artists with male artists.
But just that phrase, female singer-songwriter, that's familiar.
How?
But what if I said male singer-songwriter?
Well, that's
you don't
the default
hear
setting.
that.
I know this year in the Melbourne Comedy Festival when I was, there's like there's a category for comedy. It's like satire, political, you know, abstract,
female,
acrobats, kids. Female. I'm
really?
thinking, where's the... Well, the default setting is that everything is male. So if we talk about the
well, it's a big female, it's like a novelty.
Yeah, it is. If you look at anything, if you look at the amount of people on panels, like whether it's Bix and Specs, whether it's the Grow and Transfer, whether it's Q&A, if you subvert what the normal amount is, like one woman to 3 or 4 men, people would call it a women's show.
Well, this sort of leads me to that hottest 100 thing, because, you know, there was no females in it. There were 3 band members, 3 guest vocalists who were female, and the rest were all blokes.
So there was no female front women?
And when I saw that, you know, everybody got all up in arms about it, and everybody got all sort of, you know, sanctimonious about it. I actually thought that it wasn't a very, like, accurate snapshot of, you know, the cultural zeitgeist as it is, because you have to sort of get a bit, you know, you have to sort of unpack the reasons why things happen. And I mean, I don't think that I voted because I don't want to be on a board, and I don't care. I don't care about competition. I mean, I love community, but I don't feel competitive. And I don't need to barrack for the music that I love.
So do you think men are bigger barrackers and men are more likely to barrack and be barracked for?
Well, I'm very cautious not to be like, not to generalise, you know, and say, oh, well, men are blah and women are blah. But I think that, yeah, like, men do have a spirit of, I don't know, they like sport.
Yeah.
You know, with female musicians, especially in this country, there's a bit of a conundrum. Because there is that overarching, somehow intangible but very real spirit of competition, and there's only this much room, and, you know, move over whoever, and someone else is coming up, and whatever. It's revolting and so wrong. But you can sort of divide like a lot of female musicians into either girl or man.
Yeah. The way that they present and the way that they sing.
Present themselves. I mean, in real life, I mean, you know, off the public, out of the public eye, we know them.
One of the things we can do is set an example about an other. I remember seeing Ellen DeGeneres do comedy for the first time, and I'd been doing stand-up for a few years at that point, and she did a whole routine. I was always aware of how quickly they talked about being female. She did not mention her gender at all, and I went, this is the first time I must have seen 300 female comedians, the first time I've ever got through an entire routine and not heard a mention of her gender. A male could have done her material, and that was how I started out. That's how I always worked.
Well, that's how that's how I feel about what I do. Like, I don't wake up in the morning and go, gee, it's wonderful to be a female singer-songwriter today.
I don't think of myself as a female writer or a female comedian. Yeah,
I'm a musician and I'm a songwriter, and that is really difficult for me to actually say a lot of the time, because we get asked things like, who are you wearing? And, you know, sometimes in reviews and what, I mean, this is not just of me, but people will mention what you look like. And I mean, I made a pretty concerted effort to not to accentuate or to play on any of the female, like Jessica Rabbit vibes that you can, and you can use that to your advantage, but I did not want to do that. But I think that given what we've already sort of established in this dialogue,
which was that the sexually transmitted inconvenience of having children has been a huge reason that there's plenty of women geniuses, but that has stopped a lot of women being able to pursue their art or their career, but also because that labour has been needed in order to keep the men in the positions of power, that has been encouraged. And so women who colour outside the lines have been used as a human piñata or burnt at the stake.
But even just then, like you said, the labour intensive, that's not decoration. That's hard yakka.
No, but listen, we're talking about Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde, who does Oscar Wilde speak for? He was a gay Irish novelist. Who was he hanging with? He was hanging with, you know, the drunks and the hookers and the artists and the bohemia, and that's all fantastic. So we disregard what he says.
My mother was talking about this with her friends in the 70s, and now here we are, and you know, we're different ages, but there's just this, you know, this is probably a dialogue that will have to continue for decades. But
it's fairly stubborn.
But I love, and I don't mean to be a cornball about this, but just the very fact that the conversation is happening alone and that it's being verbalized and illuminated in print and in film and in whatever is, you know, I mean, I don't think that no one person can really turn this around, but, you know, I think that there needs just to be a very gradual, it's like turning around the Titanic. Like,
I think so, but there's been enough women out there with voices and brilliance and ideas and stuff, and nothing's changed. I think it's time for legislation. I think it's time to normalise these things so we get used to them. It's not happening on its own.